Hey everybody, thanks so much for tuning in. I just want to pop in here for a second before we get started with the show and just say the Patreon is live. So if you want to go over there and hang out with us on the Patreon, building that community, that's patreon.com/conscious environment creation. So patreon.com/conscious environment creation. And over there we have promo codes for the bonfire site so you can get a little bit off on your merch, whatever you want to grab over there. But we have behind the scenes footage. You guys can vote on different topics. If you want to be the producer level, you can actually just have whatever you want me to make a podcast about within reason, and I will make it. So let's hang out together. I can't wait to keep building this community with you. All right, on with the show. Hey, welcome back to the Conscious Environment Podcast. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I am super excited this week because I got a chance to sit down with Donnell Wrights. Now, we've been trying super hard over the last few months, it seems like, I think since February, to have this conversation, to talk about this. Now, me and him, we make a lot of different videos about patriarchy and misogyny and how it's bad for everybody, but we want to also put that in the context of a relationship. What does it mean for your marriage? What does it mean to your partner to live in this kind of patriarchal society? What bad habits do we as men carry, especially black men? What bad habits do we carry around and we bring to our relationships? So this is a conversation about patriarchy and intimacy. I hope you enjoy the conversation. What's your name? What do you do? And where can people find you?
My name is Donnell, aka Donnell Wrights, on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. Donnell Wrights. You can find me there with 2 N's and 2 L's. Donnell, like Donnell Jones. I do commentary. I'm a public theologian. I'm an educator. I am and I do social commentary as well. So I've been doing that here on TikTok for about a year and a half. Talking about everything from theology to spirituality to religion to, marriage, relationships, patriarchy, to also political and social commentary. So, yeah, you can find me on all those channels, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter as Donnell Wrights, and on YouTube. Please follow me on YouTube.
Yeah. Please connect with all the social medias, just in case one of them goes down. We gotta have backups for everything else.
Someone just asked, what's a theologian? I just want to clarify that question, I guess. So a theologian is just someone who studies or, studies theology, the study of God or divinity. So I have a master's degree in religious studies with a focus in the study of Black faith and life. And I graduated with that in 2021. So that is kind of the framework that led me to start creating content for TikTok and things like that. So
awesome. And just I know you do go live with other folks, but if you see something in your comments, our comment sections are different. I don't know why TikTok does that, but if you see something in your comment section and you want to respond to it, just straight up go ahead. And if it seems like I'm ignoring it or something like that, it's because I can't see it. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. But talking about romantic relationships, you've done a ton of videos on this topic and concept, and that really spoke to me a lot. And you kind of combine 2 ideas. You talk a lot about patriarchy, which is what kind of led me to your channel and why I started watching. And then you talk a lot about relationships. But then you started doing a couple of videos where you talked about the effects of patriarchy on relationships. And romantic relationships often have outside stimuli that affect them. So in your opinion, or what have you noticed about patriarchy and romance?
So I guess I'll start with talking about my context a little bit so people can have an idea of what my relationship is to patriarchy. So I grew up in a apostolic Pentecostal Black church, Black Caribbean church. And of course, in church, there's a lot of messaging about patriarchy, about relationships, about marriage, about women, and things like that. And then and I also, of course, grew up in a Jamaican Caribbean household as well, and a lot of that messaging around patriarchy, about gender roles and things like that, came from my experiences in those contexts. And so I feel like what I've noticed as I've grown is that seeing the examples of relationships that I had in my purview, examples of relationships like my grandmother, my grandfather, and aunt and uncle, and things like that. Most of the relationships that I saw and were in proximity to were, relationships from the church as well. So a lot of the messaging about, the roles of women and things like that was, came through very clearly. And I just feel like as I grew and as I, got into my own relationship, and as I started talking to people about advice about how to navigate a relationship successfully, the ideas that were, directed towards me just didn't seem to align with how I felt and believed about my wife, right? Or about my girlfriend at the time. And I feel like from there, I started to unpack and ask questions about about relationships and about how to cultivate romance in relationships, and how to, view your partner as a partner, as an equal partner, right? That you're building a life with together. And that's something that I just didn't, really see clearly in the examples of relationships that I grew up around. So I feel like what I noticed about patriarchy and romance is that, of course, patriarchy teaches you to turn off your feelings, turn off your emotions, to, fill certain roles, right? Fill these very specific roles. And I think that what I learned and what I gathered from my experience in life, I've always been a, emotional, expressive, sensitive person. And I think me kind of leaning into that and seeing how that was positively impacting my relationship, seeing how vulnerability, was something that my partner cherished and admired about me, seeing that being able to communicate and just share clearly like what I'm actually experiencing, right? And sit with my feelings and interrogate them. These are all things that I, kind of learned to lean into. I've always been always been thoughtful and overthink. That's why your name is always so funny. I def overthink. I def overthink about everything, and I've always overthought about everything. So I think that me sitting with my thoughts and sitting with what I was feeling and interrogating that, and deciphering what felt good, right? It felt good for me to be open and vulnerable. It felt good for me to listen to my wife and to communicate with her and to exchange ideas, right? On an equal playing field. These are things that just felt good and that I kind of leaned into, and they were countercultural to what, I was being taught and what I experienced. So, yeah.
Yeah. I feel like I had kind of a similar, I always jokingly say like villain origin story, like the moment where you feel like the world that you were taught or told this is what everything is supposed to be, you kind of, the scales come off your eyes, to have a religious allegory for it, but you start to see things a little bit differently. My grandfather was the pastor of the church that I grew up in. So it was really kind of handed down that, these are how relationships are. And something that I do want to point out, sometimes it's very blatant and kind of obvious. In churches, you hear a lot of John get read, and kind of, or Ephesians, where it directs exactly what women are supposed to do when their role in a relationship. But a lot of times it isn't so much a blatant kind of, oh, well, women are supposed to do this and men are supposed to do this. Sometimes it's just kind of subtle. It may even sound like praising or something like that. I remember I used to hear this pastor, I can't think of his name, but he used to get up and he used to tell this story about how when he gets home, his wife is there and she's ready for him, just waiting. And he's so excited when he gets to come home to that moment of his wife just waiting for him. And she's a good woman. She puts her slippers out and she's always got the mail ready and dinner's always ready. And it's a lovely thing to come home to. And on the surface, you're like, oh, wow, that does sound like something nice. She sounds very caring. Mm-hmm. But the subtext is she's got to do that. Yeah. That's what makes her a good woman is service. And I believe it was a video that you put up earlier today where you talked about how when men talk about their wives, they talk about it in the sense of service. Mm-hmm. Like what women are supposed to do for men. And actually, Christian A. Smith, another mutual mine who was on the show a couple weeks ago, we talked about this idea that you touched on earlier today, too, that it seems like sometimes men don't even like their wives or girlfriends. Mm-hmm. Could you just touch on that for a second? Because I think you worded it a lot better than I can.
You would think, I think most people when they hear stuff like that, like men don't like women, a man listening to that would just be like, what do you mean? Of course I like girls, right? Or I like women. And I think like you said, I think the messaging is just really subtle. It's things that you hear, like little seeds that are planted throughout your trajectory, right, into adolescence, into adulthood. And for me, like I said, like those seeds were planted, in church when you hear scriptures like, women submit to your husbands, and you hear scriptures in Genesis that talk about how, the woman is supposed to, will serve her husband all the days of her life as like, some sort of punishment for her disobedience and eating the apple. And you hear stuff like, the woman is always right. And you hear things like, just say yes, dear. It's almost like that sounds like that's one of those things that sounds like a positive thing, right? A man is saying yes to whatever his wife wishes. But the subtext of that is that they don't want to hear the woman's mouth, right? And so they just say yes to whatever you want. I'll just do it. I don't want to hear you nagging or whatever the case may be. Right. And I think those little subtle things kind of lay the foundation for men to actually not like women, and what I find is, in my observation, is that men will get women who look good for other men as try to flaunt them to their male partners and be like, yeah, look at this woman that I got and things like that. But actually, when they go home, when they're behind closed doors, when they're communicating, there's not much interest in engaging the person in a conversation about ideas. But then that same person will go, online or, go play the game or play Call of Duty and talk to their male friends for hours. Right. And so there's this really weird dynamic where, men are being in the pursuit of hypermasculinity are taught to pursue women and to get women and to take care of them and be a man and, put her in a house and et cetera, et cetera. But when it comes to intimate relationship, when it comes to connection, when it comes to emotional relatability, it's non-existent. And there's no desire to dig deeper and to explore that because that's not manly.
Right. I kind of just came up with this theory I was thinking about a couple of weeks ago is for men it's almost, I feel like a lot of guys would give pushback on this idea, but for men, it is encouraged to have intimate relationships with other men before it is encouraged to have an intimate relationship with your wife or your girlfriend or somebody even that you're trying to pursue. That idea isn't part of the manosphere or isn't part of patriarchy. You're supposed to find your wife or your girlfriend attractive. You're supposed to have sexual attraction to them. Exactly. But emotional intimacy that's for the boys. You tell your boys about how you feel at work, or how you want to quit your job, or the mental stress, and we don't frame it like that. It's just, oh, you're just talking crap on Call of Duty. You know, you're just hanging out and you guys are just talking for hours. But when you strip it down from what it is, you just talk to another human being about how you feel for hours.
And about your day, and about your interests, and about the things that you like, and the thing that there's mutual interest about, and the thing that your homie knows about that you don't know about, and he just putting you on to something. Like, these are things that you're supposed to do in an intimate relationship that just don't, like I said, don't get explored because it's not considered masculine when you do it with women, which is weird.
Right. It feels so counterproductive. And then I've noticed, I'm sure you have too, we've both made videos talking about these kinds of things, where there seems to be an influx of, or I don't even know if this idea is different or new, because I remember being a kid in high school where I left all of this ideology, but the kind of pickup artist sort of game, this was alive then, and it's always kind of been that way. There was a man's man that always got the girl, but when you look at it and kind of strip it away, the girl is just a thing. It's, you get the car, you get the girl, you get the house, it's just part of the collection of stuff.
And that's another one of those subtle things.
And the pickup artistry has always kind of existed, but now it's sort of turned into this kind of manosphere thing where we have the Andrew Tates of the world, and probably a bunch of other people that I can't think of their names off the top of my head because I don't like being in there.
Yeah. Kevin Samuels.
Kevin Samuels, and where it's very, very, very subtle. Actually, those are two great examples. Kevin Samuels, we could kind of hear the dog whistles and it felt very blatant. But a lot of people, when you talk about him, it seems as though his messaging was always very subtle. Oh, well, it's about making a man better. You're supposed to be your best self. You're supposed to be a high value man, because a high value man does list of things so that he can get the girl. And then once he gets the girl, then he feels fulfilled in life. But never analyze the fact that, like, getting a partner is just on a list of things that's supposed to satisfy you. It removes the humanity from that person. That's a whole person, but we're talking about them as if they're like some sort of object. But now with social media, we get these rhetorical questions. I feel like that is, ironically, we are two men on a podcast, but I think it's there's another version of us, a nega version of us that is sitting here having the same opposite conversation.
Yeah.
But I've noticed this influx of rhetorical questions. Who pays for the date? Who does this? Who does this? Who does this? And what is, I guess, your experience with that, or what's your take on the manosphere?
I think as far as the questions, right, these questions, I always think about the framing of questions, right? So when someone is asking a question like who pays for the date, the man or the woman, there's an implication, right, that if you don't answer the correct way, there's a correct answer in the manosphere when it comes to answering these questions. So when you're not answering these questions in the correct way, when you say like, well, I think that, it should be evenly split, or I think that a man should pay for the bill, or whatever there seems to be a shift too in that conversation, saying that, like, women are just dating men for, to get free meals and things like that. I see that conversation increasing. But I think these questions even being entertained in the public square is upholding gender norms, right? It's upholding these ideas about who should be doing what. When really two human beings should be connecting based on their interests and experiences. And I think that these questions we're not getting at the root of issues around dating and relationships. men and women aren't having successful relationships or dating experiences, it's not because they don't know who's going to pay for the bill, right? I think there's a conversation that needs to be had about patriarchy and who and what the desires are of both people coming into this sort of engagement, whether dating or in a relationship or things like that. So I think that's what gets lost when people are focusing on answering these kind of mundane questions that are really inconsequential in the grand scheme of things. And as far as the manosphere overall, I think that it's really concerning where things are going. We see a guy like Andrew Tate who starts posting these really volatile, opinions about women, comparing women to dogs, describing women as objects, talking about publicly about collecting women and, getting and branding women and things like that. And this guy within a year gets millions and millions of followers. And this is happening alongside the well-known and growing understanding that men in this generation are the loneliest they've been in generations. This is a thing that has been studied and that are people, that sociologists and things like that have been publishing studies about. And I think that people like Andrew Tate and Kevin Samuels and everyone who replicates them getting on podcasts and venting their frustrations, I think those podcasts and things like that become successful and do well because they reflect the growing frustration of lonely single men who are having trouble finding good women. But I think what's actually happening is that there's a misunderstanding about what is going on and what the desires are. Women have expressed repeatedly, right, that they want people who are emotionally available, who are doing the work, who are in therapy, who are interrogating and unpacking patriarchy, who are deconstructing these ideas in order to have thriving, communicative, successful relationships. That it's very clear. They've been very clear. Women have been very clear about what they desire in relationships, and I think men have gone from saying that. I think men are at this place now where they're saying that marriage is not beneficial to them because they can't meet the requests and desires of women in the context of relationships.
Right.
They're not having success, so they're saying that there's no benefit to getting married these days, and the modern woman is doomed, and there's no value in the modern woman, and all these conversations. When what's really happening is that they're unable to find partners. Women are becoming more and more. They're realizing, and they've shared this as well, that they're happier outside of the context of relationships. They're safer, right? They're more protected. They have, they found different communities, different support systems to fill the void of human connection. And as they become more become more educated and things like that, because of the advances that society's made in women's rights and things like that, there's just no need, right, for that a man is meeting, especially if they're not coming to the table with the emotional skills and the relational skills that create and sustain relationships.
Well, let me ask you this before I get that input. We've been saying it a bunch. We've been saying, kind of manosphere, and I can get into that, but we've been saying patriarchy quite a bit. So if somebody were to ask you, how do you define what is the patriarchy? Like, what exactly are we talking about? So it comes up to you, Donnell, what's patriarchy? What's patriarchy?
Patriarchy is a system that centers men in power and devalues women and non-binary individuals. It's about a system that empowers men and that gives them special privileges and advantages in society and relationships. And I think that's what it is at its base, right? Any system or any ideologies that uphold this idea that, men should be centered in conversations and discourse and the public square and different institutions, education, theology, et cetera, et cetera. But, the list goes on. It's in every institution, every major institution. It's not the shark, it's the ocean, right? I think that applies here. People have said that about white supremacy in the American context, right? But it's also the same is true for patriarchy, because patriarchy is a white supremacist idea, right? It's an idea that came from a specific context and culture. So, that's how I would define it and try to explain it.
I think that's a perfect definition. And when we're talking about things like the manosphere is more of kind of it's appeared in media in different ways, but now it's really showing up a lot in social media in the way that we're able to quickly connect with things and connect with people. And I think the manosphere is directly, like, there's a direct line to why men are so lonely, because the manosphere and patriarchy by itself sets men up in an impossible position. I think men oftentimes feel like they're not good enough or they're not ready for a relationship because of other men, not because of anything that women are saying, because the things that women are asking for, somebody kind of jokingly said in the comments, help with chores and communicate. The things women are asking for sound so mundane when you just say them out loud. But men have this expectation of what they're supposed to do and how they're supposed to provide. And the manosphere is all of those things that kind of group all of that stuff together. And some bits and pieces of it aren't inherently bad. Like, you kind of fall down sort of a pipeline into this sort of sphere. And it's starting to happen much more quickly on TikTok. YouTube was kind of always the archetype for how quickly you can get into these things. But the manosphere, the doorway to it starts with you're looking up workout videos or something like that, because you keep getting told, you keep getting direct advertisements to you saying that women, or you, every time you see a man who makes these commercials, but every time you see a big, strong man in a commercial, he always has a attractive woman. You see advertisements for fitness centers or gyms or things like that. It's always a man and a woman, and it's a very beautiful woman with a conventionally attractive man. So you're like, that's what I got to do. Easy peasy. So all I have to do is look online and find, some workout stuff. Can't afford a gym, don't want to go to a gym, or don't know what I'm doing. So I'll look up some educational videos. Cool. So you go, you watch those videos, and on the side, that's where these things start creeping in. Because your ultimate goal is to win the girl, get the girl. And this is how patriarchy manifests itself in a negative way. We keep hammering that the thing that makes you a real man is getting the girl. And how you get the girl is these things. Like with Andrew Tate asking, how many Lamborghinis do you have? It's that concept. How many expensive toys or things like that. So you're looking up gym content on the side. Maybe there's like a little thing that's like, hey, how to approach a woman if you're nervous at a club. Yeah. Okay, cool. That sounds fine. And then the next video is how to get a girl to give you her phone number if she doesn't want to. And you're like, I would like to have a phone number from a girl. But now you jumped from looking up workout videos to so that you can get better abs to how to manipulate someone into doing something that they don't want to do because they're supposed to. Yeah. And if they don't do it, it's not just the fact that you become mad at the woman for not participating in what you wanted her to. You're mad at yourself because you failed. So now you have to go back to where you started as a failure because you're not a real man until you accomplish that. So now you become more and more desperate. And this is what the manosphere is. it's a vicious cycle feeding desperation and aggression, because those are the things that you're taught are the ways to get what you want. I don't know how many times I've heard, and it's always like the action is just aggression, but it's framed as confidence. Men should be confident. Go up to the girl, grab her, tell her how you feel, and you'll win the girl.
They're going to find that attractive. They're going to like, you feel like, ooh, that's so manly that you're doing this, right? And wow.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's so manly. That's what a woman wants. She wants a real man, and you have to be a real man. In order for you to be a real man, you have to walk right up to her and ask any woman in your life how often they would love for a guy to just randomly approach them. And maybe they don't even see him coming. He just appears out of nowhere and just starts talking to them about a date or dating or something like that. Like how terrifying that situation is. I almost feel like the manosphere is like an MLM. It's exactly like an MLM, because MLMs are included in the manosphere. MLMs are Alex Jones selling vitamins. But to men, you have to take these silver supplements because that'll increase your testosterone and make you a real man. So you have to do those things. Let's see. There's some other things in the comments. Do you think part of the divide or anger some of these men feel is because they feel betrayed that what they were taught is not working? That's kind of the insidious part of all of it. Most of the time, it's not going to work because they need repeat customers. Andrew Tate needs you to buy his thing. So everything he says doesn't really work, but you just buy the next class, and that's what he's looking for out of you.
Yeah,
you get tricked into this, and then now you got to go back to the drawing board, and a lot of that is kind of the online sphere, but a lot of times, I've heard you talk about this quite a lot because you're a theologian, and there's a strong connection between patriarchy and it being painted with this kind of benign brush by the church, especially the Black church, which you and I are pretty familiar with. It seems like it's pretty baked in. You did a video a couple of weeks ago about Genesis. You've done a couple of videos about just even from the pulpit, preachers pushing this kind of thing. So I just describe that from a theological standpoint, or from the perspective of the church. How does patriarchy play a role in the Black church?
You can't talk about, I don't think you can talk about patriarchy, especially in the American context, without talking about the church, because the church is probably the primary vehicle through which this kind of messaging gets pushed into the public square. And even people who aren't churched, right, who don't go to church, will still say like, well, the Bible says you're supposed to submit. Like they forget they're Christian until they need to hold on to the patriarchy, right? And until they need to hold on to the homophobia and whatever else, and I think it's one of those things, right? And so I think the prime example of the impact of and discussion of patriarchy in the church starts in Genesis, right? It starts in the conversation between Adam and Eve, and the event that happens, the event that unfolds. And the man is alone; he's by himself, right? Or the Adam, right? It's not a gendered thing. It just means human. So this person was created, and the divine says in the scripture, it's not good for a man to be alone, so I'll create a helpmate suitable for him. That language right there, right? The idea of women being helpmates, or, helpers, assistants, glorified assistants to the man who's really, in charge of things. And, the woman just is a helper. And I think from that baseline, right, we get ideas and conversations around patriarchy that are rooted in the Genesis narrative, and that translates even to the New Testament, where you get scriptures like, women should be silent in the church, and I don't permit a woman to speak over a man, and that kind of more direct messaging against the equality between men and women. But that idea of women being helpers, I think when we look at that word, we think of assistance. We think of, someone who's helping me, assisting me with something that I'm championing, but you're coming alongside and helping me finish, complete my vision. And that's how, by and large, men who get trained and taught in the church about marriage and relationships, that's how they move forward. They move forward in their relationships with this idea that I'm the visionary leader of this relationship. I have a dream. I have a mission, a God-given mission, and my wife's responsibility as my partner, or as my wife, as my helper, is to assist me and come alongside me, right? And she will get the benefits of it. And as long as I come home and she, has things prepared and is cooked, and she has done all these, and she's worked a full-time job, because that's the requirement, right? That's what's also being asked of women in this day and age, to be cookers, maids, nurturers, etc., while also working full-time jobs in this economy. And I think that's just a recipe for disaster in terms of healthy and thriving relationships, because again, this is something that women no longer desire and have and don't need, right? They don't need to be in relationships where they, where they're carried. They have their own visions. They have their own dreams. They have their own ideas about how they want to live their life. And that idea does not include being subservient, a helper to someone who, don't even really know, doesn't always know where he's going, right? And is unwilling to have a conversation and take the input from this partner that you're supposed to be building a life with, to help improve, or to help bring clarity, or to help steer in a different direction. Those conversations wouldn't even be entertained. So I think right from the beginning, right in the narrative of Genesis, you have this idea that that women are supposed to be helpers and assist the men in their journey, right? And that's what leads to the conflict between, I frame it as a conversation between patriarchy and partnership, moving from this idea of men being in charge, men being the head of the household, et cetera, which just doesn't work and does not work in today's society because of the societal developments that we've made in terms of women's rights and women being making more money and having more education than men, out educating men. That just doesn't work for this society. And so what happens now is that when men now demonize women who are well educated, right? They say things like that PhD ain't gonna keep you warm at night, or things like that. This conversation about, like, just because and there's articles being written about the kind of professions that men don't want. Men don't want the women who are educated. I knew people who were in relationships where the man would get offended by the language that a woman was using because he didn't understand the words that were being said. And so there's just this direct attack on intellectualism. And it's like, you just using all them big words and et cetera, et cetera. And it's like, no, I'm just, having conversation. And so, yeah, I think right from the beginning, that's rooted in there. And of course, in the New Testament, there's a lot of examples, but there's also conflicting narratives about partnership, about the idea around partnership in the church, where, Paul, is it Paul or Peter? One of the two said, we're not man or female, slave or free, we're all one, and things like that. So there's language that does lean towards partnership and things like that. But the overwhelming and dominant narrative is that, women are helpers. And when they're not in their role, when they're not fulfilling their role, when they see themselves as higher or as important as the man, right? That's when these conflicts happen. And I think this is directly what leads to issues of like domestic violence and things like that take place in church-based marital relationships.
Yeah, I can't agree more. I was just thinking of this idea of emasculation, or like being emasculated by by your wife or your partner and your girlfriend, whatever. And it feeds a lot of what you were saying feeds back into, there's a lot of themes that we kind of keep touching on. It's men's inability to cope with a false sense of almost duty, I would say. There's kind of this checklist of things that men think makes a man, and that's taught to them by patriarchy. This is why we often say patriarchy hurts everybody, because these lists of things that come from patriarchy are the things that men get mad at that women display. Oh, well, she can't make more money than me. Why? Because I'm supposed to be the breadwinner. I'm supposed to bring home the money. Okay. Well, she can't use bigger words than me. Why? Because I'm supposed to be the most intelligent in the relationship. She's not supposed to be able to do such and such, such and such, such and such. There's just a list of things but it always comes back to, because I, as the man, am the one that's supposed to be able to do those things. And if they find themselves in a position where they won't be able to do those things, men don't want it. That's why
I always say that in the context of, in the eyes of patriarchy, there can be no relationship without control. If I can't control you, if I don't have power over you in several spheres, it's not just one, right? It used to be just money, but they want to make more money. They want to be more educated, and they want to be the leaders and the emotional and not the emotional leaders, but the thought leaders in the relationship. They'll take suggestions and take input, but if there's no control, if there's no dynamic of control where, I can control how you think, I can control where we move and how we exist in the world, I can control where we go to church, or I can control where the money goes. These are the kind of things that patriarchy does not, patriarchy needs control.
Yeah, exactly. And somebody's saying in the comment right now, there's also an assumption that women expect certain things. And that's kind of exactly what I'm referring to. All those ideas that men have of what women think are from other men. Like, Donnell, you said it right in the beginning. Men oftentimes date women to impress other men. Mm-hmm. Like, men often go to the gym to get big and buff to impress other men. Yep. Like, there's been studies that men who wear, it's such a silly thing, but men who wear like tank tops or undershirts or things like that at the gym, they'll take off their t-shirt if there's other men in the room more times than if there's other women in the room. If there's women in the room. Men will oftentimes flex, they'll become louder, they do these things, or they start dropping weights when there's guys in the room. They don't do that when there's women in the room.
Oh, wow.
And it's just kind of just goes to show that,
case in point.
Right. The idea is that you want the respect of other men because patriarchy tells you that men are the echelon. That's what you're supposed to strive for, is to be the best man, and the best man has a good woman, but not too good because she can't be better than you. Mm-hmm. So I want her to be super smart, but not use bigger words than me, and her degree can't have more letters than mine. And I want her to have a good job, and she's got to be able to help provide. but she can't make more money than me because I gotta do this. She could take care of the kids though. She could do all that unless it's grilling, or unless it's sports or something manly. Then I'm supposed to be in that role. I'm supposed to do those things. And woe is man because I have to go to work and do all these things that other men told me to do, that women like, that women repeatedly tell us they don't want or care about. The peacock effect, yes, yes, and but the irony of the peacock effect is it's for other men. Like the allegory that we're even using with that, like the where that saying comes from, peacock for mates, but human men peacock for other men. They don't do it. They don't do it for their mates.
Dang, that's deep. That's deep.
And I know we're gonna get pushback on a lot of this stuff. And I know there's a lot of guys that feel the same, that feel the way that we do about this subject or this topic, and they get called simps or pick-me's or things like that, right? What would your advice to a guy who's kind of teetering? He's struggling. He's noticing the cracks in patriarchy. He wants to get away from this, but he also cares about being, I guess, for lack of a better term, literally picked on about this. And I've seen your comment, your content. I've seen the comment sections. I know we get picked on. We get called simps, get called pick-me's, get called this, that, and the third. Everything that we do is disingenuous, or we're just doing this to get laid.
Yeah,
like. No. that's not it, man. But what would your advice to, especially young men that they feel something's wrong, but they don't want to be ostracized by their peers? Do you have advice or something for them?
It's a lot. I feel like. And I don't want to sound like I'll just say, I think that the amount of education that I had to do to unlearn how I was raised was a lot. And it was extensive, and it cost me money, and it cost me time, and it cost me all these different things. And so I come on these platforms and I talk about these things because I know that, because I'm trying to cut through all of that, right? I'm trying to find people who are on the fence, men who, are looking for examples, possibility models, in the words of Janet Mock. I just found out about that term, which is a great term that just talks about us being examples and possibilities of what it could look like to exist as men, right? As Black men.
Right.
And I think the first thing that a young man should do who's having these questions or who's on the fence is ask himself, how does he feel? I think there's a way in which, especially if you grow up churched, that you're kind of taught to disconnect your spirit or your spirituality from your flesh or from your body. But I think that young men need to get back into their bodies and really think about how they feel. Like, do I feel angry? Am I happy? Is what I'm doing working? Right? Is it working?
Right.
These are things that you should be interrogating. And I don't think, when I say working, I mean, like, is what I'm doing, is the way that I've approached women, right? Because the men desire relationships. They do, right? Men are happier in relationships. They want relationships. And I think the reason why they go on these platforms or go commiserate with people like Andrew Tate or, Kevin Samuels, who have all these opinions about women, is because it's a reflection of their frustration and anger with women. So I would make them interrogate if it's, how are they feeling? Is what I'm doing working? And what am I willing to try something different and try to think differently about things. That's one. Number two, I would get. It seems like when you say the word patriarchy, it immediately turns men off from the conversation. The amount of comments that I've gotten from men saying like, "Oh, you talking about patriarchy? Only women talk about patriarchy." Comments like that.
Yeah.
And it's because they see patriarchy as when they hear a man say the word patriarchy, they immediately think simp. They immediately think, oh, this man, is just saying these things to get women or whatever the case may be. Or what I often get called as a panderer. I'm trying to pander to women.
Right, yeah.
When I'm talking about offering social commentary on issues. But they don't see Kevin Samuels and Andrew Tate as pandering to men. And saying what they can to make sure that they get their checks and their, Andrew Tate made hundreds of millions of dollars through the manosphere and by sharing his commentary about women. So I would get them to interrogate, or release. I would try to get them to shed stigma around the word patriarchy and really like think about what it means. And I would just share information. It's layered. I don't know if there's a correct full answer because it takes a lot of work. But I would suggest therapy. I've been in therapy for almost 4 years. It's transformed my life. It's transformed how I do relationships. Expanded, added tools to my toolbox about how I communicate. Helps me to keep my anger in check and interrogate what I'm feeling in my body. These are things that I learned from therapy. So I would highly suggest therapy if it's possible, if you have the means and things like that. I feel like maybe that would be the first step, because I think that's the first step in starting to do the work and starting to talk out loud about how you grew up and what you saw and what you saw from relationships and what you want out of relationships. And from there, just talking about it, right? Actually talking about the harm that you saw perpetuated in male-dominated relationships or things like that will help you to start thinking about what you want and what kind of relationships do you want to see yourself in? What do you want for yourself? What do you see you and your partner doing, right? I would get them to imagine and to dream. Like, what do you want? You want to hang out? You want to travel? You want to go on coffee dates, you want to go to the movies, you want to, like, what do you want from a partner? Imagine the quality time, think about these things. I really think imagination is a big part to play for those who are on the fence or who've only seen one way, who've only seen one example, right? Male dominated relationships where the man doesn't really like his wife. He's just, but he's taking care of her or he's helping provide for her or whatever the case may be.
Right.
I think men know that they want more, especially if you're on the fence, right? That tells me that right. You're at least curious, that you want something more than what you've always seen, right? So those are some things that I would get them to start looking into, and I would show them some books. I would show them The Will to Change by Bell Hooks, All About Love by Bell Hooks as well. Things like that. So I'll gauge and go from there. But those are some of the things I would say. But it's deep. I think it's underestimated how deeply entrenched it is in every aspect of our culture, and even in our small talk and our conversations, right? The way that we frame ideas about women and about women in relationships and things like that. It's deep. And everywhere you go, school, church, the coffee shop, the barber shop, like you're hearing a lot of the same commentary.
Right.
So to break free from that takes a lot of work.
Yeah, it does. I think like you said, my advice, the first thing is emotional intelligence and emotional regulation. Sunny Day Jones is in here chatting with us, and that's something that she talks about quite a bit, is having a grasp on your emotions. Without doing that, we'll constantly not understand why we're reacting to the things that we react to and the way that we react to it. If you don't feel centered in your body, if you don't understand what emotion you're feeling at that moment, it'll always... I can pretty confidently say that with a lot of men still struggling with where they are in their place with patriarchy or what they have still internalized about it, a lot of times the only emotion that we're allowed to feel is anger.
Oh, yes.
So that's what we end up being. That's what we end up defaulting to. It's funny. Just I just think about watching my wife with our kids, and we have a nearly 3-year-old, and my wife will sit and talk with our nearly 3-year-old kid who's at a point where everything is big emotions. You have big emotions. That's what she says a lot. But one of the things that she always asks is something that I would encourage men to ask themselves. Are you sad right now? Or are you mad right now? Either answer is okay, but we have to understand which one it is. And almost 9 times out of 10, my daughter will say that she's sad, and then she'll ask for a hug because that's what she actually wants. Now, if you look at her, she's throwing stuff. She's falling down. She's pounding on the ground. She's throwing a tantrum. She's being a little kid. That's what little kids do. And a lot of times I think men don't understand when we're throwing tantrums. We don't understand when our emotions have become too big for our bodies. We have big emotions and we aren't sure. So sitting and asking, am I mad at my wife? Or did she hurt my feelings? Did my girlfriend do something that I thought was inconsiderate and I'm hurt right now? Or am I mad at her? Because anger, I think, comes from a lot of times from a place of intentionality. And especially with patriarchal men, we have this understanding that anger should become almost physical every single time, but like a slight should be met with anger. Like if somebody does something to you, they make you upset. Upset equals mad. Mad equals angry. Angry equals this small, tiny list of responses. It could be physical. It could be screaming. It could be yelling. It could be hitting something. It could be doing whatever. It's going to be some sort of big physical reaction that we're going to end up having. But are you sure you want to yell at your wife? Or did you really just want her to give you a hug? When you came home from work and you were upset because you had a long day at work and it sucked and you're stressed out about everything and you walk in the door and you don't even got your shoes off, you don't even got your coat off. She goes, hey, can you take out the garbage? Can you make sure that you take the laundry out? And you go, oh my God, every single time I walk in the house, you're always asking me for shit and blah, 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 blah. Are you mad that she asked you for something, or are you sad that she didn't ask you about your day? Is that what do you really want a hug? And I think a lot of men, without the tools necessary that come from therapy and things like that, we have a hard time really understanding those emotions and how we can act with them, or how we're supposed to interpret them or deal with them. And we just pick the wrong way because we're just told this is how we're supposed to do it. And somebody asked earlier, where is it? And a man's perspective, how do you think women can partner with men to positively push them forward? And my suggestion to women is we're not talking to women. I know it's anticlimactic, but the same way that I feel about the same way that I feel about white supremacy. The reason why I frame things, and this is what I want to mention. You said panderer earlier, and I always think that's such an interesting way to describe the work that we do with this. And I always have to say in the comments, I'm not talking to women. I'm talking to men.
Mm-hmm.
I'm never talking to women. Mm-hmm. The goal isn't to get women to do anything. That's again a patriarchal response to this.
100,000%.
Women have to change because men can't control themselves.
Literally,
no.
All men are trying to, they're after one thing and we're all just doing it a different way, right? So we choose to come on and talk about patriarchy to men and hope in the back of our mind that it doesn't make sense.
Yeah. And that's why as much as I do appreciate when women frame or ask questions like that, like, hey, what can I do to be a better partner? That's talk to your therapist. I am talking to men about how men can make it a safer, better situation for women. And hopefully you don't got to change anything, because the problem is patriarchy, and women didn't create patriarchy. Exactly. Men did. So since men created it, I got to talk to men so we could talk about getting rid of it. Mm-hmm. that's the thing. Men have to, and I just made this analogy earlier today when talking about racism, but I think it still applies. Patriarchy is, imagine a wall full of doors, and on each door there's a lock, and there's a key to open that lock. Mm-hmm. And that lock says in big letters, patriarchy. And all those keys say patriarchal ideas. And the way to unlock those doors is to use your patriarchal idea to open that door. Asking women to change is like taking the keys away. It doesn't change the situation. Mm-hmm. It makes small incremental changes that might do something in the short term. But I'm not trying to take the keys. I'm trying to change the locks. Mm. So even if there is a man that's a straggler that still has these patriarchal ideas, what I'm trying to do is change the power system so that he won't be able to function with those ideas. I want it to be unsafe to have patriarchal ideas like that. I want men to be uncomfortable voicing those things or having those things, or it being so old hat that you don't even want to have those things. You don't even want to do that anymore. And I think that's kind of the place to go with that. But we are kind of coming up to the end here. So I know we just talked about ideas and things to do, but I love to leave people with actionable items on the podcast here. And we are talking directly to men. Do you have anything that is like a you said a couple of books, so repeat those, but something that is like I guess I don't want to say tangible thing, but a bit of advice that, the guy that is on the fence, the 20-year-old that's like, something's weird about this. What advice, or what can you say? Hey, do this. I know that you gave some book recommendations, so repeat those because I loved that. But if there's anything else that you can think of that's like, you should try this as a resource or something like that to kind of get rid of these things, because I think people don't know kind of where to start on these journeys.
So the books I recommended were A Will to Change by Bell Hooks, and All About Love by Bell Hooks. I think All About Love is a good book for everyone to read, all humans to read, but men especially who are navigating ideas around I think men need to reframe what love is, and they need to have a different understanding and context for what love is and what it looks like. And I think that is what, again, like I made the video earlier about, what love looks like under patriarchy, right? This idea that I do love my wife. I do this and I do that, right? And the same thing with women. That is a good woman because she does X, Y, and Z. It's taking away, it's doing a reset and reframing how you think about love and what it looks like and what it requires, right? Because that's a big, huge part of the work. And even as I'm saying that, I feel kind of like, again, I guess if you're on the fence, you're open to this. So I hope that this finds the right person, and that people are actually engaging and looking at those books, because they will give you a new perspective. Even if you don't agree with everything that is said in the book, at least it will give you a different outlook, a different perspective on what these concepts look like and why it matters for us to do the work of deconstructing them. But I think a big first thing that people should do is really, again, like you said, we said this earlier, but I'm going to come back to it, is the ability and sitting with your emotions and sitting with what you're feeling on a day-to-day basis, interrogating those feelings on a day-to-day basis. And so you mentioned earlier about talking about men who are using anger as a front for their masculinity. Anger is the only emotion that men are allowed to have, because when you're angry, you can just, and if that anger, if being angry distorts your ability or idea of what a man is, because all of a sudden someone says something to you and now they got you in your feelings. Literally, they got you in your feelings, whether that be anger, sadness, whatever, and that makes you uncomfortable. So not only are you angry, but you feel exposed and you feel vulnerable and you feel like someone is seeing you get worked up and get riled up, and so you respond physically. Doing that work, the work of checking your anger as it rises, is something that is a tool and something that I did early on in therapy. Just from frustrations I would get from conversations, and after doing some thought work and sitting with what I was experiencing, what I was feeling, realizing that, this is not really about this thing. It's about that thing that happened earlier that's still bothering me. Yep. It's about that text that, such and such sent me that, made me feel weird and uncomfortable. And now I'm all, worked up. And so whatever that last straw is, that last comment is, that is, typically said by your partner or whatever, you come home and they say the thing, it just triggers all of those emotions, and it causes this reaction. So I really think that men need to, this work is important for men to do in order to not create violent relationships, not create these violent, volatile relationships where people are just reacting with their big emotions. And, and typically in a partnership that's going to be reflected, right? Because not all the time, but I think that again, this is just work that men need to do in order to kind of mitigate a lot of the dangers that come from women being in relationships with men who haven't done this work. When they enter relationships with men who haven't done this work, they tend to end up being harmed, whether emotionally, physically, or whatever. And that's a big part of what is keeping, women at bay and making them not want to enter relationships. Like it's a matter of like, am I threatening my livelihood by entering into this relationship with this man who has done no emotional regulation work, right, who relies on religion as a spiritual kind of manipulation thing to rope me into doing all these different things. That is a big part of what's keeping, women at bay from men. And so if the goal is to ultimately be in a relationship, that is work that you're going to have to do to create a safe environment, not only for women, but for yourself, right? Because that harms you too, having all these emotions bottled up, not interrogating them, never sitting with what you're feeling and just turning on the game and, whatever the case may be, and not holding space for your own thoughts. these are things that that go a long way, and I think they're really important. So those books, Emotional Self-Regulation is what it's called, and consuming content like this. Men are out there, men exist who have done the work and who are doing the work out loud and in public. And if you want to see examples of what it looks like, they exist. There's really no excuse, right? In terms of, if you don't like reading, if you don't enjoy reading, get on my TikTok, get on, Ryan's TikTok, get on listen to women too, who are having these conversations, right? Those are good, I think, first steps. In order to deconstruct the thing, you have to see that it's possible to find happiness and peace and et cetera, on the other side of patriarchy, right? On the other side of this idea that I have to be in charge, right? And I have to do everything on my own, and I have to be a man and dominate, and et cetera, et cetera. Getting on the other side of that, seeing examples, right, of what it looks like to be on the other side of that, and people who have done the work, goes a long way. And men aren't seeing that, and they're not necessarily looking for those examples because, again, there's this commentary about these men, right, who are on the other side of this kind of white supremacist patriarchal concept as like simps or, whatever the case may be. So read the books, sit with the emotions, and consume content from people who are doing the work.
Yeah, I again can't agree more. Another book recommendation, if it jumps out at me, yeah, there it is. Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates. That's a good recommendation of a book that is a Black man exploring his emotion and his feeling, his experience with love, and talking about his experience with anger. And it's not directly a book talking about patriarchy or anything like that, but it is an exploration of emotion, and it's a love letter to his kids. And I think it's just a really beautiful example of the normalization of emotional intelligence. I think that's something that we don't do as often as we should. Somebody was asking, how do men rectify harm caused by patriarchy? And I think one of the first things that we can do, and I'm not going to take credit for this idea. My wife said it in the comments section. Men need to speak up when other men are actively engaging in these things. And you don't have to be super duper aggressive with it or challenging if you don't feel safe. But something that I think would help these circles not have so much locker room talk is normalizing emotional intelligence, normalizing talking about how you feel more than just like, oh man, this pissed me off. Like, no, like talk about how you feel. Talk about other emotions than just anger or sexual desire, which seems to be the only two things. Like I loved over the summer, like the men frolicking thing, especially Black men. We don't get a chance to just show joy. We're happy. We see ourselves being happy. We see ourselves doing things, but true just joy, a lot of times we don't often get a chance to show that. So that would be my suggestion, thrust into my brain by my partner. Explore your emotional intelligence with your immediate group and make that normal so that you all talk about it. Because just one simple thing that I do with my wife, we've been radically kind of practicing this for a couple of years now. Just saying to her, and it's so refreshing, just saying to her, I'm sad today.
Mm-hmm.
She never asked for much more detail. Okay. Do you want to talk about it? Is there a reason? Sometimes there's a reason. Sometimes there's not. Sometimes it's just life is hard and heavy and it feels weird and you feel anxious. Sometimes I'll just text her in the middle of the day. I'm feeling really anxious. Why? I don't know. I just feel like it. Life. I don't know. The world's scary. That's why.
It is. Yeah.
And that can come if that feels like a scary prospect, or you feel like you'll be pandering or a simp or you're not a real man. Normalize that kind of conversation with your immediate men circle. Talk to them and say that. So that would be my two quick suggestions. Talk vividly about your emotions with people, and a good kind of another good starter book. You gave great examples too. Another good starter book is Ta-Nehisi Coates' Between the World and Me. Grab that book, take a listen to it. It's on Audible. It's on all the things. I read books with my ears, so.
There's also a docu-short called Between the World and Me on I think HBO Max. As another alternative. I think they go through the chapters of the book with different celebrities, but they're all reading his words, and you still get to see the words of a black man who's exploring all these concepts that way too. So
yeah. All right. So just for folks who are just tuning in or jumped in late, just repeat, plug anything that you have coming up, or I know that you do like speaking things. You obviously write, but just repeat for us. What's your name? What do you do? And where can people find you? And then plug all the things.
So my name is Donnell, aka Donnell Writes on TikTok. I'm on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. I'm trying to get more active on those other two spaces, but for good reason. I don't really like it over there. But I do. I'm a public theologian, so that just means I talk about spirituality, God, etc. out loud in the public square. I am a teacher. I do educational content around theology and around things that I have learned in my seminary education. I do social commentary, social and political commentary, and I also do marriage and relationship commentary as well. So follow me if you want to hear, good ideas, refreshing ideas around these topics. You can follow me on all those platforms as Donnell Writes. As far as what's coming up right now, I'm really just trying to buckle down and start working on my my book and everything like that. So
awesome.
That is coming down the pipeline, and there's some deadlines I have coming up with that. So I'll be doing a lot of that work. So as I work through that, I'll probably be posting less, but I'll be, doing duets and doing more lives and things like that in order to kind of make up for not being as present. So thank you all. Follow me on those platforms.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Donnell, for coming and hanging out with me. I'm so glad that we finally got a chance to do this. And we'll definitely have to do this again because I want to hear more about this book once you start really.
Yeah, once I get it rolling, for sure.
Yeah, because you gotta work out the ideas, the chapters. Come on, let me be a sounding board, man.
Yeah.
But thank you all so much for tuning in and listening and hanging out with us tonight. It's been an amazing time. We love you so much, and you all have a good night.
Have a good night, y'all.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Conscious Environment Podcast. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I enjoyed recording it for you. And thank you again to my guests for coming and hanging out with me. That was an amazing conversation, and I had so much fun with you. We're definitely going to have to do that again. If you want to support the show, there are Cashapp and Venmo links down below, as well as a link to our brand new Patreon. And patrons, you don't only get to unlock some exclusive, amazing tiers that we have over there, but you get to unlock exclusive pricing at our merch store. So go and check that out. If you can't support the show financially, I completely understand, but a 5-star review goes a long way on Apple Music and Spotify and all those places, as well as downloads for some reason. So if you want to help our rankings, just simply download the show. It's free, it doesn't cost you anything. But you know what else doesn't cost you anything? Telling a friend or telling your mama. It's going to be their favorite show. And remember, one last thing. I love you, and go drink water. Like right now. Go drink water right now. Stay hydrated. All right. See you next week. Bye.